Next year marks the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. A six-part PBS series by the Ken Burns Company premieres November 16th about the American Revolution. Phil Deloria is one of the Native American consultants on the project. He talks about his involvement in the overall screenings of the nearly completed episodes.
For me, one of the things that was really important was the ways that, this team was very receptive to my suggestions. And even at that very late date, for example, Ken likes to have big closes where he meditates on things and what, in this case, what the meaning of the revolution was. And interestingly, he had gone to the 1924 Native Indian Citizenship Act as part of his closing. And, one of my comments was like, Ken, for Native folks, this connection is just not going to work. It's really, and I don't know that it actually holds water, even in the terms of that you're actually, but gone, it was gone. And so, the ending is quite different now. I think I was certainly not the only person who was involved in advising, Michael Whitkin, Ed Blackhawk, Maggie Blackhawk, several others, and the thing that for me is really, striking about this is, Ken makes several arguments in the film that this is a rebellion that turns into a revolution, that this is a bloody, vicious civil war, which people are killing each other all the time. So he's elevating the loyalists who stay behind, that it's a global war that involves the Caribbean and these empires. And I think this represents not only Ken's interests, but the sort of voices of Native folks who are advising that this is a war about Indian land. This is all about clearing the decks for, the Americans to actually fund their revolution and fund their country on the backs of Native people and their land. When the film says, look, this is a civil war, part of that is this is a civil war between loyalists and patriots. But part of it is that their conflict generates civil wars in Indian country, right? Among Haudenosaunee people, among Cherokee people, and that Native folks are completely embroiled in the fighting of this war from start to finish. There's a very nice segment that they do about the Stockbridge Regiment, which is right there at the very beginning in the Siege of Boston, and which is completely devastated, in a fight outside of New York City. And fragmented, and thus with consequences for the Stockbridge community, which then moves to Brothertown, which moves to, ends up moving to Wisconsin. So you can see like the outlines of Native country in the sort of struggles that are happening here. And one of the most important segments, I think, is the segment around the Clinton-Sullivan campaigns in New York State that completely devastate Haudenosaunee homelands, send 5,000 people fleeing to Fort Niagara, the burning of every town, 40, 50 towns, every orchard, every stored up, every cornfield, every bit of stored food, every house and every dwelling. And as Michael Whitkin says in the film, like, some of these are long houses, and some of them are wood frame houses with windows in ways that are completely legible to these patriots who are moving across New York. And what happens is the clearance of this land, the dispossession of these people in a military kind of way, and the greedy eyeing of this land by every soldier who is in that force, right? And the minute the war is over, what happens? The rapid expansion into, what will become New York, the western part of New York State. So, these folks are watching Haudenosaunee land. They're seeing how beautiful it is. They're seeing how productive it is under Haudenosaunee sort of nurture and governance. And they want that land for themselves. Same thing happens at the beginning of the war, with the burning of the Cherokee towns. So, these are these over mountain people. They want into Kentucky. They do not want the British to, restrain them. And the minute Cherokees start resisting under Dragon Canoe, the first thing they do is send thousands and thousands of militia people in, and they burn out the Cherokee towns. 50 towns just destroyed in the same kind of way. So it's a moment where Americans are waging, who will become Americans are waging really total warfare against Native communities with an eye to land speculation and land seizure. And, part of this speculation is happening before the war even starts, right? People who are signing treaties and land contracts for vast tracts of land, particularly in the southern part in the Kentucky area. So, this is a war that is, in ways that have been effaced, I think, a war very much about Native land and about the construction of American wealth on the backs of native land. And of course, this has been something that has concerned scholars and native folks for a very long time. And we're really starting to see the dimensions of wealth that was built around native land. And here's where it all starts.
The American Revolution, a 6-part series by Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein, and David Schmidt, starts November 16th. Extensive classroom resources are at ouramericanstory.org.